You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Well, here we are, once again on Community Radio 3CR, Pedal Radio. While other radio stations spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars putting out garbage to you, we spend almost nothing putting out interesting things to you, which some people may think is garbage. Right, what have we got organised this week? Oh, just a few things just to keep you busy over the next 2 weeks, because obviously there's nothing worse than staying at home being a keyboard warrior or an armchair critic, is there? So just in case you're interested, tonight, which is Wednesday, the 21st of August in the Judeo-Christian calendar, that's the 21st of August at the Footscray Hotel, which is in Footscray, 48 Hopkins Street, Footscray. 6:30pm for a 7pm start, and that's the key, 7pm start. I'll be chatting to you about Canadian and North American revolutionary and rebels who found themselves in Australia's penal colonies in Van Diemen's Land and New South Wales, and their importance to the radicalisation of early Australian citizens pre-1854. So that's tonight. Now, next Sunday, not the Sunday coming, but the 1st of September, Wattle Day. What an extraordinary day. You can all feel spring coming. Public interest before corporate interest is having a little picnic. And I think the key word is little. At the corner of Latrobe Street and Spring Street in Melbourne, starting at 1pm. That's at 1pm, Sunday the 1st of September. We'll be unfurling a few new banners, chatting amongst ourselves and plotting the destruction of the evil empire. And that's right. So that's Sunday the 1st of September, 1pm, the Parliamentary Gardens. Where else? At the corner of Latrobe and Spring Street in Melbourne. If you're coming along, bring some food. And if you've got any food, bring some musical instruments. If you've got any musical instruments, you could bring yourself and a friend. Okay, now don't forget the 3rd of December, Eureka Day, 170th anniversary of the Eureka Rebellion. That will be occurring at Ballarat, not in Melbourne, but at Ballarat, at the Eureka Stockade Centre, which is the corner of Eureka and Stall Street in Ballarat, commencing at 4am. Full day's activities. And possibly this year, believe it or not, we may have the first 1.5 hour morning ceremony broadcast live on Community Radio 3CR, courtesy of some very, very exciting new staff at Community Radio 3CR. Shut up, Joe, or they'll throw you out. Now, the sacred cows have come in. They're enjoying themselves. They've got garlands on. They are doing really well today because they heard that we are vegan. That's right. That's what they've heard. Is it true? Is it not? Come tonight at the Footscray Hotel and find out. There's no food there. You've got to bring your own. Here we go.
Minds that plot destruction.
Relax now.
Sorcerer of death's construction. In the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning. Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed mind.
Welcome to the Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia on the National Community Radio Satellite. Listen to the Anarchist World This Week, Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. Listen to analysis of local, national, international events. Listen to analysis you'll never hear anywhere else.
Well, it's the Anarchist World this week. Broadcast across Australia, courtesy of the Community Radio Network. We're breaking in a new producer, so don't worry if there are little bits and pieces that aren't brilliant, but that's the way life is. You've got to train the young people to take over from the old people. That's the way it goes. My name's Joseph Toscano. I'm hosting today's program. This program is streaming live on 3cr.org.au. It's come to you from the studios of 3CR in Melbourne, courtesy of the Community Radio Network, heard across Australia, north to south, east to west, and it's always great to get correspondence from people across the country re the anarchist world this week, because, as you know, the government guild at ABC, bit of a tragedy these days. The corporate-owned media, well, they're Nazi saluting around the place. What can you say? So listen to community radio stations across the country. And just in case you've forgotten why we have community radio stations, during the Whitlam era, the Murdoch media was all-powerful. And in order to break their hegemony, the Whitlam-led Labor government handed out community radio licences to community radio stations so that people like you and me could, look at things in a different manner. There's no such thing as an alternative news or mainstream news. It's all news. It's all analysis. But you can analyse things in a variety of ways. And what we try, and the key word is try, possibly we succeed and other times we don't, is try to present things in a non-authoritarian perspective, a perspective based on the central tenets of anarchism. Anarchos, without rulers, what gives rulers the ability to determine the lives of billions of people, inequalities in power and wealth. So the anarchist struggle is the struggle to devolve share power, possibly through direct democratic means, and the struggle to hold wealth in common and use it for the common good. Exceptionally conservative concepts. Obviously, the road from here to there is a complex one, where many strategies will be used, but the fact is this is a struggle that didn't begin yesterday, or last year, or a decade ago, or a century ago, or 1,000 years ago. It began since life appeared on this planet, especially Cro-Magnon life form, our humanity. Once we slaughtered all those other human-like creatures, we were able to dominate the planet. And guess what we did? We gave over power to leaders and rulers, religious base, non-religious base, secular, nationalist, you name it. We're all very happy to sit in the background, cross our fingers and wait for the second coming. Well, obviously the second coming isn't coming unless you believe in, unless you accept the science regarding the climate emergency. So maybe those biblical stories about fire and brimstone will come. Oh, shut up, Joe. Let's move on. Okay. Now, fear. Fear is an interesting concept, isn't it? It's central to our lives. Central. It's something we're not born with, but it's something we learn very quickly. Fear. And the fact is that it hangs around for all eternity. When you're young, the fear, of your siblings, the fear of your parents. And when you get out into the big wide world, the fear, of the big wide world. And then when you become a wage slave, the fear of not having enough goodies to pay your bills, the fear of being unemployed, the fear of losing what you've got, the fear of, being under an authoritarian regime and taken away. But the great thing about fear is it's a great mobilising thing, isn't it? And our beloved Prime Minister in waiting, Mr. Peter Dutton, is a master. But the thing is, this is not new. All right? This is not new. Fear has been part and parcel of the Australian experience since colonisation began. The fear among First Nations Australians about being destroyed. The fear of the convicts, of floggings, arbitrary punishment. The fear of starvation. Then the fear of being exploited. But this is a different type of fear that we're trying to create in our society. See, there's us and them. And if we can actually kind of get you to hate them, then we have the basis for a political, social and cultural movement. And it's always been like that in the land of milk and honey, isn't it? The fear of the yellow hordes. I remember quite vividly in the 60s, big posters as the Menzies government tried to get re-elected, of little arrows across Southeast Asia down to Australia. The yellow hordes were going to come and get us. It was the same after World War II, wasn't it? The old populate or perish problem. We realised that we could be invaded very quickly. But importantly, although fear is something that we need to harness, it's quite realistic to have a fear of fire, have a fear of pain, have a fear of unemployment, have a fear of a climate emergency. These are all kind of logical. Not that logic matters in the 21st century. These are all quite logical responses to the situation we find ourselves in. But when you find yourself in a society where power and wealth is invested in fewer and fewer and fewer hands, and you see wealth trickling up, they told me that gravity, things fell down, but when it comes to private investment, private profit, corporate capitalism, it trickles up. Extraordinary way that wealth trickles up. It's poor old Einstein would be crying in his soup if he saw what was happening, because, he was all about gravity. But getting back to what I'm trying to say is, it's about when you try to generate fear of the other because they wear funny hats or their clothes are different or the colour of their skin is different or their sexuality is different, then what you do is you divide society for short-term political gain. You create artificial divisions. I remember when the Prime Minister in waiting, Mr. Peter Dutton, a few years ago, was talking about the fact that people couldn't go out for a meal in Melbourne because of African gangs. Look, I remember I used to go out for meals quite commonly, But again, if you can generate that fear through the World Wide Web, through the corporate-owned media, through the government-gilded ABC, you can get people to think that they're under constant attack, then you do create a political climate. But it's a negative political climate, negative social climate. And what I found extraordinary, because, I don't just sit in this studio talking to myself once a week. I mix with a lot of people in a variety of, situations. People of all different, classes, if you want to use that old-fashioned word. And the fact is, this is a very effective political strategy generating fear in the community. And that's why it's important that people like you and me who can see through this garbage, can see that this causes dissension, division, anger, violence in Australian society, needs to fight back against this fear. The fact is that having instant communication is a very simple way of generating fear. As we saw in England during the recent riots, a little bit of fake news is always good for a bit of a riot, isn't it? But more importantly, we've always had this, whether we have social media or not. We've always had this fear in us, especially in Australia, where we think we are part of a community that somehow has been set adrift in a hostile environment. And we see it now play out, as you see, in our foreign policy, where instead of trying to establish defence arrangements with the sovereign nation states around us, what we do is we put all our eggs in the United States basket. That's about fear of our neighbours. The fact is, this is where we live. This is where we need to be able to contain that fear and understand what is rational and what's irrational. I mean, a lot of people talk about the irrationality of so many sections of society in the World Wide Web. But the fact is that irrationality is part and parcel of our everyday life. And generating fear and pandering to that fear is one way of creating chasms, not just divisions, but chasms in our society, which can never be papered over. And to see major political figures in this country, people who believe they will be the next Prime Minister of Australia, using this tactic to promote their minuscule, pathetic, political, social, cultural agenda, highlights how little discussion and debate occurs in this country, despite the fact that we have access at our fingertips to almost every little fact and figure on the planet. You listen to The Anarchist World This Week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. So, fear. All we have to fear is fear itself. It's a great slogan. All we have to fear is fear itself. Because if we're consumed by fear, whether it's fear of the Russians, the Chinese, your neighbour, somebody at work, somebody in the media, then you've lost the plot. Because it's fear itself which is the problem. And those elements of society which generate and magnify that fear to such an extent that it corrupts relationships, conversation, and day-to-day life need to be resisted. And this is one thing, one little thing that you, as a listener to the Anarchist World This Week, can do. Each and every one of us has some type of imprint, some type of, impact, whether it's the people around you, whether it's the people in your social circles, whether it's the people in your virtual circles. The fact is that the battle against fear is a fundamental battle. It's a fundamental battle we need to be involved in order to change the current dynamic which is being created, where fear, not policy, not inequality, not homelessness, not violence, but fear becomes the central theme of the next federal election, possibly in May 2025. Let's move on. You've got to laugh sometimes. I mean, look, I try as much as possible not to get involved in the virtual world. Obviously, I'm involved in the virtual world with, Facebook and YouTube and all that stuff in order to get this type of message across to a greater number of people, obviously with minimal success, but we try. But as far as my own personal life and, is involved, I try to keep out of that world. And a lot of people are beginning to understand that world is corrosive, not just to them, but to their very thinking processes. So it means that I do a lot of things which a lot of people do virtually, like walk into a supermarket, walk into a shop, into a financial institution, walk into some type of office. Because I like that interaction. And what I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed, those of you who have not totally been consumed by the virtual world, is all these little signs that are popping up everywhere. Treat our staff with respect. Any dissension, I don't use the word dissension, you'll be forcefully removed. I'm thinking to myself, why do we need all these little signs everywhere? Why are people getting angry? Why are the staff who are at the battlefront of the corporate sector being subjected to this abuse by customers? Or why have we reached a situation where security, private security has become such a fundamental part of everyday business? It's very simple. You see, there's no service, none whatsoever. What happens? Corporations, transnational and national, in their struggle to create ever-increasing profits for their major shareholders, are trying to force people to do all their interactions on virtual platforms in order to maximise profits. What this means is there are fewer and fewer and fewer frontline staff provided. You see, human beings cost money. You got to pay them wages. You've got to pay superannuation. You've got to pay, workers' comp. So in order to maximise profits to shareholders, you get rid of the human touch. But unfortunately, not everything can be done on the virtual platform. Or maybe some people don't want to do shit on the virtual platform. Why do you want to do shit on the virtual platform and get charged 1.2% or whatever, for an interaction because you've done it on the virtual platform when you can do it in cash? So people like me who want to, access, who don't want to have, my personal financial dealings or my personal interactions dominated by, some virtual platform which you have no control over. At least in my communication, I have some control over that interaction. What happens is we become frustrated and we become angry because there's not enough staff there. I mean, last night I had a typical experience getting home late after a day's work, pop into a supermarket. Yes, it's all self-service. I said, no, I don't want to be served. I want you to serve me. If you give me a discount, I'll self-service. I said, call the manager. The manager said, I can't give you a discount. Well, I said, well, service. And I eventually got my service. I wasn't unpleasant. I wasn't impolite. I was just insistent. And that's the problem. We're no longer insistent. If you scream and shout, they'll call security and bundle you out or call the coppers. But if you stand your ground, it's a different matter. Why should they profit? Why should they profit by removing service? Like the old customer that stays with the same bank for 50 years that has gone through 40 transformations. And the new customers get a discount, but the old customers get rorted. It happens over and over again. because of the fact of convenience, we're willing to be manipulated, or to save a few cents, we're willing to be manipulated and treated as sheep. So while you act as a sheep, you will be treated as a sheep. When you get angry, you'll be treated as a nut. But when you stand your ground, it's a different matter. Try it next time. Because if we don't try it, before you know it, every transaction will be on a virtual platforms. That's what they want. Is that what you want? Is that the convenience you want? Think about it. Listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. This program is podcast. You can access the podcast by going 3cr.org.au. Look, just in case you're in Melbourne town on the 1st of September, that's Wattle Day, yes, a very non-contentious day. I used to think maybe the 3rd of June should be Australia Day, that's Mabo Day. And then I used to think maybe the 3rd of December should be Australia Day. And then I'm thinking, all these complaints, why can't we find one unifying day? And I thought, 1st September, Wattle Day. Who hates wattle? Well, I assume people with hay fever hate wattle. But the thing is, Wattle Day, very non-contentious, a great day to celebrate this country, celebrate the past, the present and the future. So in order to celebrate Wattle Day, the 1st September, Public Interest Before Corporate Interest is holding a picnic in Melbourne. That's the first Sunday, the 1st September. We'll be holding that picnic in the Parliamentary Gardens. No, not the official Parliamentary Gardens around Victoria Parliament. We wouldn't be allowed in there. But there's a little public garden next door to Parliament House. It's got a little fountain. You can play in the fountain if you want to. It's one of these walk-in fountains. It's Sunday, the 1st September, starting at 1 p.m. Bring food and drinks. We don't cater. So it's a community event. It's a collective, not just for Public Interest Before Corporate Interest members, but anybody else who's interested in what we are doing. So come along, 1 p.m, Sunday the 1st September, corner of Latrobe and Spring Street in Melbourne. We're going to unfurl a few banners. We've got a few new banners. We've got a few new ideas. Obviously, we're about change. We're about putting the interests of the many before the interests of the few. If people have forgotten what public means, it's the many. Unfortunately, most people think public things are horrible things in our society because they're underfunded, because we're taught that only private investment of private profit is the only religion that's worthwhile following. So join us on the 1st September and come along. Bring some food and drinks. If you've got a sprig of wattle, bring a sprig of wattle. Gaza, the carnage continues. Yep, they're talking. Iran's in the background, Hezbollah's in the background, the Houthi are in the background, Iraqi forces, irregular forces are in the background. Israel is hoping that, against hope, that they can draw in their little US allies into the fray. And they've kind of helped sending in a few aircraft carriers and submarines just in case things heat up. Look, you know, I know, the hostages' families know. The only way to stop this happening is for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza and reconstruction. But the Israeli government and the Israeli Defence Forces have got other ideas. They think if they use the old tactics, like Peter Dutton, using the tactic of fear, using the old tactics of, of war for war's sake, that somehow the Israeli state will continue to exist ad infinitum. Unfortunately, Australia and the Israeli state have a lot in common. We have forgotten where we live. where they live. And that peace comes by negotiating, talking, making agreements with your neighbours. There's no point relying on some overseas force like the USA, whether you're in Israel or whether you're in Australia, to defend you against your neighbours. So the sooner people understand this, the sooner we may see initially a temporary and then a permanent ceasefire, and then some type of movement to actually ensure that what is happening in this part of the world will never happen again. Think about it. Remember, we went on a little trip a few months ago, almost a year ago, kept walking past dead bodies, lineups over 40 kilometres now, mainly old people, women, children, a few Hamas militants here and there, and it continues. But more importantly, you think about it. Think about your own situation. Think about your children, grandchildren, friends, under the threat of constant bombardment, under the threat of starvation, under the threat of not being able to access medications and treatment for common ailments. Although the direct impact regarding death by bullets and bombs is over 40,000 in Gaza, it has a population of about 2.3 million, in a city half the size of Melbourne. The fact is, for every person who's taken a bullet or a piece of shrapnel, there's 3 who've been wounded, and on top of that, for every person who's died as a direct result of the Israeli Defence Force, there is another at least 3 to 4, another 150, 200,000 that have died needlessly because of the impact of the war, the indirect impact of the war. And I'm not talking about collateral damage, I'm talking about direct impact of trying to survive in a situation where the basic necessities, including sanitation, are no longer available to people. So don't let the Gaza carnage fall off the virtual and legacy media platform. It's very easy to shrug our shoulders and turn our backs and walk away. But the fact is that if it can happen in Gaza, it can happen anywhere else. Once again, you're listening to The Anarchist World this week on your local community radio station. Now, do you get a little bit upset? No, I'm not upset. But do you get upset? All right? There you are. Invasion Day honours, Australian honours, and then you've got Kingy. Oh, I forgot the Queen's dead. We've now got a King Charlie. You know, the King birthday honours list. Isn't it a really interesting facet of our society that we honour our so-called heroes on Invasion Day and on the King's birthday? You would think we'd got over that by now, wouldn't you? But no. And then when you go through the honours list, not that I do, but some people do, and you do hear that people who get the good honours, the top-notch honours, normally tend to be some type of political figure who's done their job, and maybe some corporate industry, some doyen of industry or the corporate world, and then those who've spent their whole life, plugging away at something, they get their Order of Australia medal, or possibly even an Order of Australia. And obviously people like you and me, radical activists, you never see them on the honours list, maybe because they say no, which is understandable. But so, in 2006, we set up another honours list, the Eureka Australia Day Medal. Now, the Eureka Australia Day Medal was set up by the Anarchism Institute, because the Anarchism Institute these days, with the assistance of Ballarat Trades Hall, sets up the Reclaim the Radical Spirit of the Eureka Rebellion celebrations, which are held in Ballarat on the 3rd of December every year. And we've been doing that since 2002. And obviously we'll do it again this year for the 170th anniversary celebrations, and I'll speak about that another day. But I'm really interested in this concept of the people who do the work to actually initiate and promote change which has an impact on the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, are always forgotten when those issues they have been struggling for so many decades, those issues they've made so many financial and personal and family sacrifices for, are incorporated into the legislative agenda. Things like the National Disability Insurance Scheme, things like the introduction of Medicare, things like the introduction of marriage equality, and the list goes on and on. You never see them in any nomination list. Every year, on the 3rd of December, the Reclaim the Radical Spirit of the Eureka Rebellion Celebrations Committee gives out 6 Eureka Australia medals. And the medals are actually made by a local Melbourne sculptor. They are individual medals. And it's just to say to somebody, thank you. Thank you for putting so much effort and energy into that particular struggle. Thank you for making a difference. There's no monetary reward, it's just thank you. That's what it's about. And on the 3rd of December at 10 a.m, around 10 a.m. on the 3rd of December, which will be a Tuesday this year, we give out the medals at Bakery Hill. And Bakery Hill was the site of the monster meeting which led to the occupation of the Eureka site by the Eureka rebels. That was on the 29th of November 1854. So on the 3rd of December 2024, we'll be giving out 6 of these medals. Now, this is a nomination process. It's an open nomination process. If you know somebody who you think should receive a Eureka Australia medal for services to humanity, not services to themselves, but services to humanity, send in your nomination. You can email it to info. You can email it to anarchistage@yahoo.com, anarchistage@yahoo.com, or you can email it to info, info, at PIBCI.net. You can leave a message on 0439 395 489. We'll have a little discussion about who you want to nominate. Or you can actually put it down, writing, that thing you do with a pencil or a pen on a piece of paper. Yes, you can do that, and you can put it on that, and you can send your nomination to Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052. Now, nominations are open now, and they'll close around the 10th of November. Now, obviously, we need a contact name, the person you're nominating, why you're nominating them, and a mechanism by which we can contact them to see whether they are willing to accept a Eureka Australia medal for what they've done. It's one of the highlights of the 3rd of December, And I encourage you to nominate people, because I know there are many people who listen to this program who've had extraordinary dealings with human beings, who've gone that extra mile, who've actually made extreme, personal sacrifices in order to do things not to promote themselves or their family or their community, to promote campaigns and issues to change legislation, whether it's the Gaza struggle, whether it's the struggle to improve the housing situation, whether it's a struggle to improve the situation of First Nations people. The fact is, this is one way that you, as a listener to this program or the podcast, can actually have an impact anywhere across Australia. And it's limited to people who are living here. It's the Eureka Australia Medal. Obviously, there are many people outside this country who've done extraordinary things, but this is about people living in this country. You can be a citizen, you can be a resident, you can be a refugee. As long as you're here, let's do it. And obviously, if you've known of somebody who has died, who has made an exceptional contribution but was never recognised, this is an excellent way that you can actually do something for them and their family and friends to recognise their contribution. So once again, you can leave a message on 0439 395 489. You can send in something to Post Office Box 20, Parkville 3052, or you can email it to anarchistage@yahoo.com or info@pibci.net, and put down Tuesday the 3rd of December as a day you're going to take off from work if you're working. If you're not working, a day you can come to Ballarat and celebrate the 170th anniversary of the Eureka Rebellion and what it means for us today. And that's the key thing, what it means for us today. You're listening to The Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. You may have noticed your water bill has come in recently. And guess what? You do realise that water in this country has been privatised to a significant degree, okay? And you've got all these entities which buy water and then sell it to you. And guess what? Prices have increased on average about 20% in the last 12 months because there's a new way that they've actually marketed this essential commodity. I mean, you can go without food for about 40 days and survive, but if you go without water for a few days, you're going to have big troubles. Isn't that extraordinary? We've got to such a state in this private investment for private profit world that we've made water into a commodity, housing into a commodity, water into a commodity, airports into a commodity, essential services into a commodity, you name it. If we can make a buck out of it, we'll do it. And then what happens? Where's all the gains we were supposed to get through competition? Well, look, I'm an idiot, obviously. I'm an idiot because, I know nothing about economics, obviously, do I? I haven't got any economic degrees or, I'm not an economic forecaster, so I'm an idiot. But being an idiot, sometimes you have an insight that really intelligent people don't have. For example, we were told that if we privatised everything, there'd be increased competition and it'd be hunky-dory for all eternity, We'd find the Holy Grail. It's not the spear or the chalice that God or Jesus Christ drank from before he died. No, the Holy Grail, it's money, all right? We'd be rolling in it. Because, public enterprises are always inefficient. We know that. That's what we're told. Did I believe it? No, but unfortunately 99% of Australia, or let's say 90% of Australians believe the hype that if they privatised every essential services known to humanity, that somehow our lives would be good. But we forgot one little thing. One little thing. Competition is not the lifeblood of capitalism. When you have a deregulation, privatisation, globalisation, corporatisation agenda, what that means is that little fish eat big fish and big fish eat bigger fish. So what happens is that you get these large corporations which dominate every aspect of our existence, whether it's food production, food distribution, health care, dental care, you name it. And what you will see is corporations dominating that facet of the economy. Now, when you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 corporations battling it out to make an extra buck for their shareholders or a privately owned company, what happens? Competition disappears. So capitalism does not equal competition. That's why 90% of small businesses fail within 5 years of being formed. That's why so many small businesses now find themselves on the ropes. Because competition is not part and parcel of capitalism. There is no competition in a corporate world. None. Although you may think there is. So if you're an idiot like I am, and you've got questions regarding the privatisation nightmare we find ourselves in, and childcare is the latest. We're told that private childcare is failing us. And let's not remember, most so-called privatised corporate entities are bankrolled by you and me through taxation revenue, which is used to subsidise these industries. Remember Centrelink, when they used to have a job centre and you'd go there and they'd try to find you a job? And now you've got a job provider who makes a buck every time they talk to you. But I don't want to talk about that because you know about it all. And the fact is, for far too long, we've accepted the garbage that private is good, public is bad. Now, public is good, private is bad, especially corporate capitalism. If you had millions of little businesses competing against each other, well, maybe you'd get ahead. But that's not the way the game flows in a society which is dominated by one thing. Now, people talk about morals, they talk about ethics, they talk about law, they talk about community. But there is only one thing that matters in our society, and that's the creation of a profit. If you don't create a profit, you die, if you're in the private sector. So isn't it about time we talked about diversifying our economy? I'm talking about the reintroduction of public services to provide services for the many, essential services. Isn't it time that we did something to bolster the moribund cooperative and collective sector of the economy? Maybe through earmarking 1% of superannuation fund contributions to assist the formation of cooperatives and collectives. Wouldn't that be a much more viable, competitive system where you had 3 modes through economic models competing with each other? A private model, a public model, and a corporate and collectivist model. Wouldn't then you have a little bit of competition? See, today, And what we've done through privatisation is we've removed the public model from the economic equation. So we are totally dependent on the private model. And what that means is that more and more taxpayers' money is sucked up by these corporations to provide services which should be provided by government. You listen to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. As I said before, I can talk till the cows come home. Nothing's going to change unless you do something about it. And one thing you can do is open your mouth. That's right. I'm not talking about revolution, riots, bloodshed. Open your bloody mouth. Talk to people about it. Create the social conditions which lead to change. It's all very well being a virtual warrior. It's all very well, being angry. I remember the old IWW slogan, Industrial Workers of the World. Don't be angry. Get even. Don't mourn, organise. That's the key. If you look at human history, which I'll be looking at tonight, at the Footscray Hotel here in Melbourne at 48 Hopkins Street, where we'll be looking at the role Canadians and North American rebels and revolutionaries who were sent to Australia as convicts had in the formation of this country. It's those who make the effort, who generate the change. And these are the type of people I was speaking about, when I was speaking about Eureka Australia medals for 2024. Now, two little things I'd like to end off with. Two little things, nothing great. Parliamentary suspensions. Wow. I cannot believe this. I don't believe it'll get through. Could you imagine this? Parliament suspending people who've been elected by the electorate to represent them for a 3-year period in federal parliament because of obnoxious behaviour. Hey, even I'm no fan of parliamentary democracy because I understand its limitations. It's the amoeba of the democratic system. Democracy is rule of the people, by the people, for the people, by an engaged public, and that's the key, an engaged public. But having parliamentary suspensions, that's ridiculous. You can see governments ganging up on opposition figures who they don't like and suspending them. It's not the role of Parliament to suspend politicians who are acting badly, who are accused of acting badly or even found of acting badly. That's the role of the electorate. So instead of this crappy legislation they're talking about, to keep politicians in line, why don't they do a little bit of radical legislation, like introducing legislation that if 2/3 of the House of Representatives believes a parliamentarian's performance or conduct is so obnoxious that they're forced into an electoral rerun, a new election in that division? Think about it. That gives the people the power to decide if that so-called obnoxious politician is really obnoxious or not in their eyes, because they elected them. And if you're going to suspend them, for a period of time, and their behaviour is so obnoxious, isn't it up to the electorate, not up to Parliament, to actually make that decision? And you make that decision by holding an election in between elections. Say if 2/3 or 75% of Parliament, which is a high benchmark, vote that particular individual should be suspended. Think about it. Why leave it up to other representatives to do our job for us? You listen to the Anarchist World this week, CFMEU. Well, the emergency legislation's gone through. As I said before, wouldn't it be? I'd like to congratulate the Greens for not, following the hoi polloi. The fact is, come on, fine. There are elements in the construction union which have been bad, All right. Well, that's what we're told. They are alleged to have been bad boys and girls, and they need to be punished. Now, I thought we had laws for that. I thought we had laws in terms of the way institutions were run. I mean, isn't that the role of Parliament, to make laws? And now we have this situation where all these extra things are going to be piled on people in the construction branch of the CFMEU because a number of allegations have been made regarding their conduct. This is a mechanism via which they're going to try to strip the radical elements out of the construction union. And let's not forget that if it wasn't for the disbanded Builders Labourers Federation, that institutions like the Regent Theatre, Bakery Hill in Ballarat, where we give out those Eureka Australia medals on Eureka Day, would have all been knocked over, and we would have had more concrete blocks in their place. Think about it. One rule for the construction branch of the CFMEU, another rule for this country's financial sectors, for the people who gave you robo-debt, for the people who have caused so much harm in the aged care industry, for the people in the private financial industry which have caused so much damage to so many people, and the list goes on and on and on. Royal Commission after Royal Commission after Royal Commission. But when it comes to an organisation which has a strong membership and does demand some share of the profits for their members through having a strong organisation, well, then what happens? We pass legislation in Parliament in order to strip them of any ability to look after the interests of their members, despite a Royal Commission 10 years ago, despite industrial relations laws which make striking illegal outside an enterprise bargaining agreement, period. You've been listening to the Anarchist World this week, broadcast across Australia via the Community Radio Network. My name is Joseph Toscano. I've been hosting today's program. If you're interested in attending a few things, well, tonight, that's Wednesday the 21st of August, at the Footscray Hotel, 48 Hopkins Street, Footscray, 6:30pm for a 7pm start. I'll be speaking about the Canadians and North American revolutionaries and rebels who were sent to Australia as convicts and the impact they had on the democratic struggle in this country. If you're around on the 1st of September, don't forget the Public Interest Before Corporate Interest picnic at the Parliamentary Gardens in Melbourne, at the corner of Latrobe and Spring Street, 1pm start. Bring your own food and drinks to share. But if you want to be, you want to hog them all, you can hog them. We don't care, but just bring along food and drinks. Don't forget, this program is podcast. You can access the podcast by going to 3cr.org.au. You can leave lovely messages on 0439 395 489. You can email me on anarchistage@yahoo.com. Public Interest Before Corporate Interest YouTube channel, josephtoscano.nub YouTube channel, Joseph Toscano, Facebook page, you name it. I've got the virtual disease. So it doesn't really mean much. What is important that you start getting involved. Thank you once again for taking the time to listen to the Anarchist World this week. If you like the program, share it with your friends via the podcast, 3cr.org.au. Thank you for listening to the Anarchist World this week on your local community radio station, courtesy of the Community Radio Network.
Evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction.
An analysis you'll never hear anywhere else. Anarchist World this week. Australia's sacred cow slaughterhouse. 10 a.m. every Wednesday. Listen to the Anarchist World this week for an up-to-date analysis of local, national and international events.
Poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast produced in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.